If you ride like lightning, you're gonna crash like thunder.
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about the 2012 crime drama film, The Place Beyond the Pines. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of movie reviews, 4K Blu-ray reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, and we do podcasts now, if you're into all that, then this is the channel for you. And nothing would help this channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So The Place Beyond the Pines was directed by Derek Kai in France, and this movie stars Ryan Gosling, Bradley Cooper, Eva Mendes, Ben Mendelsohn, Ray Liotta, Mahershala Ali, Rose Byrne, and Dane DeHaan, and there's still more actors in there that I'm probably forgetting because this movie is a stacked cast, and this is actually the first time I've actually caught up to this film. This movie came out in 2012, and at the time I would have to say that was a time in my life where I wasn't watching as many movies as I am now. I was seeing movies still, but just not as many, and this is one that kind of just came and went. I never really caught up to it, and I meant to catch up to it when I caught up to Blue Valentine in about 2014 to 2015 because it's the same director. It stars Ryan Gosling again, and I don't know why, but I just never saw it. And I've seen plenty of people say that this is one of the most underrated films of all time. And I've had plenty of people recommend to me that, hey, you should check this out. And I think what really did kind of turn it off for me is Blue Valentine. Blue Valentine is an amazing movie. It's definitely one of the most realistic tales of any kind of relationship you could have. And it's also just heartbreaking and depressing and a very tough watch. But it is very realistic, and you'll definitely feel something while watching that movie. And Ryan Gosling turns in, and Michelle Williams, and incredible performances in that movie. But like I said, that was kind of like a one and done. It's been very hard for me to ever even go back and revisit it, despite it being such a well-made movie. So I don't know why, but I guess this movie, in the back of my head, I kind of associated with Blue Valentine. And there are certain aspects of The Place Beyond the Pines that is similar to Blue Valentine, but these are very different movies, and this movie, the ambition alone in it is just incredible. And before we dive too far into the movies, this is actually a subscriber request for me to review this movie. We have a couple of these coming up. I don't want to say his name on camera because, I didn't ask for permission to, but he did recommend this movie, and he wanted me to do a review for it, and man, I'm glad you did, because let me just say right off the top, this was a phenomenal movie. I am embarrassed that it took me until 2023 to finally watch this movie. And we're going to talk complete spoilers about this film, so if you want to see this movie and then come back and watch the review, I highly recommend that, because I went into this movie without ever seeing a trailer for it. I've seen clips of it, I've seen some screenshots, I've seen Ryan Gosling obviously with the face tattoo and the tattoos on his arms and the cigarette dangling out of his mouth, but that is all I knew about this movie. I didn't even realize, I had already completely forgotten that Bradley Cooper was even in this movie going into it, so I recommend just going in completely blind, because I think the way the story unravels for you if you go in completely blind is a lot more rewarding than knowing what's going to happen. So that is your final spoiler warning, so let's just dive right into this movie. And this movie tells the tale of Ryan Gosling. We start off with him. He's basically a motorcycle stuntman in a traveling carnival. You ever seen one of those big circles where, you get three motorcycle guys in there and they somehow don't hit into each other? It's some just incredible work. He's one of those guys, and one night he's in town and he meets Eva Mendes' character, and they have a fling, and then it's about a year later he realizes, he tries to catch up with her. He knocks on her door. Her mother answers, and she says, hey, who's this? This is your son, Jason. And, then that leads into more aspects. Ryan Gosling, in his head, he's like, I'm a father now. I have to take care of my son. And I believe that this wraps up all the way until the end of the movie. And a big theme of this movie, I think, is like being unable to break the chain, or like what you pass down to your kids, or fate, because I believe that Ryan Gosling's character had the exact same fate as what his son, as we end this movie, is going to have. That is what I took away from this, because at the very end of this movie, we see that Ryan Gosling's son, Jason, now rides off into the sunset, essentially, but I believe he's just going to end up being like kind of a lonely drifter with a lot of pain in his heart, just like his father is. And unfortunately, I do believe that they will meet the same fate. And for Ryan Gosling's fate in this movie, he does decide, I want to take care of my son, but he doesn't really know how. So he ends up getting with Ben Mendelsohn's character, and they decide, we're going to orchestrate some bank robberies. And we got a pretty solid plan about it. And actually, that's funny, because that's how Ryan Gosling and the director decided to make this movie, because Ryan Gosling had fantasies about being a bank robber, and he decided, what would be really cool is, like, people are always going to be searching for the motorcycle, after you do the bank robberies, but we're going to put that bad boy in a U-Haul, and you know what? No one's going to be any more aware of that than anything. They're just going to keep looking for the motorcycle. And the director said, I literally just wrote a movie about that. So that just shows you the working relationship these two have. They're kind of firing on the same exact cylinders. They're on the same wavelengths, and they really just, hey, you know, it was like a match made in heaven. But Ryan Gosling, despite being one of the stars of this movie, is not in this movie that much. In fact, I would say this is just very much a companion piece for each of these actors. I wouldn't say any of these actors have a starring role in this. You know, there's definitely characters we concentrate more on, like Bradley Cooper and Ryan Gosling's character are like the cornerstones of this film, but like we still spend so much time with everybody else and what their aspects are. But these two, you know, with their stories, even once, unfortunately, you know, again, Ryan Gosling's character and Bradley Cooper's characters, the way they overlap, because we spend about the first third of this movie just with Ryan Gosling and what he's going through, trying to raise his son. But unfortunately, Eva Mendes has moved on. She's in a very happy relationship with Mahershala Ali's character, and they're raising his son, Jason. And he's trying to raise money for his son, and the only way he knows how, like I said, is just to rob banks. And these bank robbery scenes are actually very intense and, again, very realistic. That's what this director does amazing. I feel like he captures that realistic feel and tone to it. He just nails it. And these bank robbery scenes are intense. The scenes of him fleeing and finding the U-Haul truck and just driving into the back are all phenomenal. And then that leads to a scene later in the movie about, you know, Ryan Gosling. He's pretty much about to get caught. He's getting chased by the cops. One of the cops sees him get away, but Bradley Cooper, who happens to be a young rookie cop, sees him, and he's like, he caught up to him. He's about to catch him. They get into a house. Ryan Gosling, you know, he's violent, but he's not the most violent. Like, he means well. He just doesn't have his emotions in check. He has a very bad anger problem. At one point in this movie, we see him hit Mahershala Ali's character in the head with a wrench, and we just don't know why. We don't know what's ticking in his head, you know, but he seems like he still cares. He just doesn't have control of himself. So, Bradley Cooper and him, you know, they're like kind of both have their guns drawn. Bradley Cooper knocks into a room, and he shoots Ryan Gosling's character. Ryan Gosling's character shoots back, clips him in the leg. Ryan Gosling falls out the window, slams his head back on the ground, he dies. And that came out of nowhere. I did not expect that. I was like, oh, he's got to be alive somehow. Like, you know, it's Ryan Gosling. This is his movie, right? But no, we shift completely into Bradley Cooper's character, and now it becomes his movie. And just like Ryan Gosling's character, he has a 1-year-old son, and it's just not sitting well with him that, even though he killed this guy, Ryan Gosling, it's just not sitting right with him. He feels like, you know, like, what was his pain? What was his emotion? And Bradley Cooper doesn't say this all out loud. You see that pain behind his eyes. I think Bradley Cooper is the best actor in this movie. I think he does a phenomenal job just face acting and the pain that he feels. And now he has to go on with his life. And unfortunately, Ray Liotta playing another dirty cop. Like, Ray Liotta, I guess, just got typecast as dirty cops, mob guys. It just, I guess he has to look for it because he plays pretty much this same role in Copland from 1997, I want to say. But he's perfect at it, so why not? But Bradley Cooper, you know, he has a conscience. He's just not on board with what Ray Liotta and his boys are doing. He's not on board with stealing money. And one night they try and steal money from Eva Mendes' character, Mahershala Ali's character. They just looked at them as, like, you know, pieces of crap. Like, you know what this guy did. He's nothing. So we'll get away with it. But Bradley Cooper just can't take that, and he tries to basically bury these guys. He tries to rat them out, and the police chief, you know, he's like, you don't rat out on other cops. We just don't do that here. You know, speaking again what, like, the police force mentality is and that police brotherhood. But Bradley Cooper, again, he just can't take that, so he goes even higher up. He goes to his buddy. And they expose this whole fatal flaw in the system, and but Bradley Cooper, despite doing the most honest and real thing, still looks out for himself in the end and still makes that one, I believe, fatal mistake in his life that I'm sure he'll live to regret, where he basically forces them to make him an assistant district attorney because this guy went to law school, and then eventually we jump 15 years in the future and we see that, you know what, he's up for attorney general. So this one decision that he made, in the moment it was really stressful and he was trying to do the right thing, but he still wanted to see what he could get out of it in the end. And that's what leads into a dark path for him and his family, basically, and it ends up with fate again. We're talking about fate, as his son and Ryan Gosling's son end up in the same school together, and yet their paths still somehow cross together. And this is kind of one thing I want to say that kind of feels a little bit like Crash from 2005, where our main characters just still somehow always find each other. But the movie's trying to explore that, where the decisions that you made earlier in your life, eventually they're always going to catch up to you. You cannot bury your past. You have to face your past head on. And if you don't, it'll just catch right up to you, and that's exactly what happens. These kids end up crossing paths, they end up partying together. Bradley Cooper's kid is basically one of those spoiled rich kids who has never had to really face reality, and he's selfish, and he just looks at everybody else as like the same as him. Hey, everyone's got these same exact luxuries that I have, but unfortunately Ryan Gosling's son's character does not. He has to deal with regular life, and when one night he just basically tells him like, hey, go get me some Oxycontin. Ryan Gosling's son does. He just goes and steals it from a pharmacy, and that's where we see basically that his son has that calmness and that deep anger in him. He's just a quiet, angry kid, just like his father was. And this is the first time we see it, like he's got that in him where he's able to rob places and almost have no conscience about it, where it just becomes just a part of his life. And then, of course, these characters figure out what's really going on, and that Bradley Cooper had killed Ryan Gosling, and his son figures it out, and he's like, I can't go on. Like, he's like, I have to face this. And that moment when he's trying to have sex, Dane DeHaan's character, but he's so focused and angry. Like, he feels like he figured out what is this pain in his life. And he goes, and we don't see it on camera, where he just knocks out AJ, Bradley Cooper's son. And then he goes and grabs Bradley Cooper, brings him into the woods, and he's about to kill him. And then he opens his wallet and he sees the picture. And then he realizes, oh, this guy has been living with the pain of killing my father all those years ago. And that what I think of him is not exactly the truth. That doesn't tell the whole story. This guy has been living with this pain his entire life up to this point. It kills him, and he knows that he's responsible for how he turned out in the end. Even if it was unintentional, he is partially responsible for the person that Jason ends up being, and that's why it makes it so hard on him. And when he breaks out crying, and then Jason realizes, all right, I get it. And then we eventually, we get to that point in the end of the movie where, life goes on. Bradley Cooper becomes the Attorney General. And Jason, he basically just rides off into the sunset. And like I said, I believe he's just going to end up meeting the same fate as Ryan Gosling's character, because it's really hard to break the chain in life. We all somehow end up like our parents, whether we want to or not. It's in our genetic code. It's the kind of people we are, and this movie is just tackling that. The decisions that our parents made, we end up having to deal with in our lives anyway. So, you got to think about the legacy you leave behind and how fate is. And this movie is really exploring that in just a huge epic tale of almost 2.5 hours. And the ambition of this movie is phenomenal. I thought it was just an incredibly well-made movie. It's not a perfect movie. There was some plot holes in there where I was like, did they explain that? And then I was like, no, they didn't. And they kind of circled back to it a little bit later. And I'm like, there was a little way we could have transitioned this to make it just come off a little bit cleaner and fill in the plot holes. But maybe they had to cut some stuff for time, because this movie is already long and it's an epic. So we're trying to tell so many different stories at the same time. We're jumping forward in time later in the movie. So to fit that all into a film, this is kind of a movie that probably would have been fleshed out a little bit better over like a 7-8 episode Netflix or HBO series, but to fit it into a movie, and a really good movie that had me gripped the entire time. And like my wife, she's sick right now, and she was just laying on the couch with me trying to go to sleep, and she got wrapped up in the story too. And she wanted to go to sleep and everything like that. And she couldn't. She's like, this movie's just that good. And this movie is a well-made movie. Just a phenomenally acted film, which shouldn't be that surprising with a cast like this. It is just stacked across the board, and everybody is turning in some great performances. But Bradley Cooper really does stand out amongst all of them. I thought he brought something extra to the table that made this movie feel special. But that's not to take anything away from the other actors in this. And movies like this that just make you think, make you feel, these are the kind of movies I truly love. I love a good story like this, that it really just explores our world and what it means to just be human and what life is. Not everything that we see from a person tells the whole story. I think that it helps to explain to us that, everyone is dealing with something. You don't know what's going on in somebody else's head. We put on this front for everybody else, but what we actually all feel individually is very different. And you know what? We shouldn't judge based on that. Like Bradley Cooper's character in this movie, he really operates in a moral gray area where I'm like, I don't know if I feel for him or I don't. It's just really hard, because I feel like he really did have the right choices in mind. He always wanted to make the right choice, but when something is dangling in front of him, he couldn't say no. And really, I think we all like to think that we wouldn't do something like that, but given the opportunity in the moment, I feel like if somebody put your dream in front of you, it's gonna be hard to say no. And I think this movie just explores all these different deep themes amazingly. I think they do a great job. There's some aspects I don't like, sure. And does it feel a little bit like Crash from 2005, where it's like, how do all these characters still somehow always cross paths, or almost like the Star Wars series, like nobody else matters in the world but these characters? But when you're telling a contained story like this, I thought they did just a great job with it. I can't believe it took me this long to catch up to it, and I can totally see why people have said that this is one of the most underrated films of all time. A movie like this that, you know, kind of came and went, is forgotten about, and plenty of other movies came out that same year that all got Academy Award nominations, and this movie was just kind of like something that came and went, and that was it. Nobody really cared. I mean, there are the fans of this movie, but I mean, it did pretty good at the box office. It made just under $50 million. It's a Focus Features film. This was never going to be one of those movies that, you know, ended up making $100-200 million at the box office, but it should be more recognized than what it is recognized today. And I could highly recommend this film if you haven't checked it out. And if you do want to check it out, I just grabbed the only Blu-ray that is available for it right now. This is it. We don't have any 4K or anything. This is the only Blu-ray you can get. I bought it off of Amazon, and it's a pretty solid Blu-ray. You get a DTS HD 5.1 on there. The visuals were pretty good. I mean, obviously it's an older Blu-ray. I think it would definitely benefit from a 4K scan because this is a beautifully shot film. The chase scene in this movie, I would love to see that in 4K between Bradley Cooper and Ryan Gosling's character. One of the most intense scenes in the film, and imagine that with 4K and a Dolby Atmos track, just killing. It would be great. But we do get a nice, pretty solid DTS 5.1. There's one scene in this movie where there's a rap song playing, and the bass was just going so hard. I had to turn my volume down because my wife was getting pissed at me. And it was just that one scene where it was just so much louder than the rest of the movie. And I get what they're going for, you know, because you did feel that. And even the scenes with the score, because the score in this movie I think is really good and helps to build that tension throughout. And the DTS HD 5.1 does a good job with that. But I think a nice Dolby Atmos track might take this to the next level. And this kind of film, I think it deserves it. It also deserves it because the visuals on this Blu-ray are really good. But I think, again, with some HDR, some Dolby Vision, we can really shine this up real nice. Now, the extras on here, I was pretty disappointed, actually. There's a making of featurette, and it's like 4 minutes. I thought it said 43 minutes, but it was 4 minutes and 32 seconds. So when I turned it on, it was over. I was like, did I click something? It would have just been so cool to dive into the making of this movie again because the ambition of this movie is incredible. I would just love to know what everybody was thinking going in, other than just some 5-6 second clips of them saying, yeah, no, I wanted to do it. You know, I was really impressed with the script. You know, the stuff we always hear at all these junkets. I would have liked a little bit more of a deeper dive into that. But hey, maybe one day down the line, I could see Arrow Video, Criterion, or one of the other boutique labels picking this one up. Maybe it'll get a resurgence in popularity, and people will recognize that, you know what, this is a great film that deserves to be talked about as one of the best films of the 2010s, because that's exactly what I think it is. You know, just because you got to admire the filmmaking, you got to admire the acting, and you got to admire the story. And I really can highly recommend this if you haven't seen it. Overall, I'm going to give this film, even with the Blu-ray mixed in there, but I'm just going to really rate the film. I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. I think it's a phenomenal film, and it's really hard for me to take some points off. I just had a great time watching it. I can't wait to revisit it. You know, this is definitely one of those movies that will go into my yearly rotation, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. And that's going to do it for us here today on another episode of Let's Talk, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and we do podcasts now, so search for us on your choice of podcast networks. Search Let's Talk Entertainment and Media. We do 2 episodes a week on there that you could also still watch on YouTube. And if you like those, think about maybe giving us a 5-star rating, because that really does help them to push our podcast. And it helps us to keep doing these videos here on our channel. So anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate all your support. And until next time, enjoy your day, guys.